I'm Katie, General Manager here at ADAC. For anyone who's joined us since our last talk, thank you for being here for Digital Day. Again, this is one of our two business series that we host every year, and Digital Day is always in the spring, and it focuses on more of your digital tools, digital technology in general, and anything you can use in the social media world, so to help grow your business. So thank you so much for being here today. Again, I just want to remind everybody to pick up a copy of this event guide that's either in the chairs or over in the table in the back, as well as a notebook. This is a hands-on day of learning, so we want you to take copious notes and make sure that you've got takeaways to help grow your business. And what else? Oh, social media. Can't forget that on Digital Day. All of your handles and your hashtag are at the bottom of this event guide as well. And then just a reminder, we're going to take a break in between our two presentations, this one and then the next one that starts at 1. So if anyone needs a bite to eat, of course we do have our wonderful Hungry Peach Cafe, which is located on the second floor. If you haven't been there and need directions, just grab one of us and we'll tell you where to go. But hopefully that you will be back for our other two presentations later on this afternoon. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Holly and Liz for this great presentation about art.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, we're going to introduce ourselves. I'm Hollingsworth Phillips. I am from Charlotte. I'm an interior designer. Have been in the art world and interior design forever. Actually went to college as a fine arts major and lasted 1 semester. I realized it took a lot longer. The classes were longer and I was not very good. So I became an art history major and then did lots of decorative arts classes and studied at Sotheby's in London and Winterthur and did an American arts course and antique study. And then ended up worked at ADAC here at Travis & Company for 5 years and then moved back to Charlotte and I'm an interior designer there. And I also have a lifestyle blog called The English Room, and on that I do a weekly feature of artists. So I'm always on the hunt for kind of up-and-coming artists and people that I find through recommendations, friends, Instagram, etc. And art is definitely a passion of mine. I have too many gallery walls in my house because I keep buying too much art. And I'll let Liz tell you about herself.
Hi, I'm Liz Beaman, Delman. I have been in the arts for as long as I can remember. My paternal grandfather was an artist and art history professor at Carnegie Mellon, and my maternal grandparents collected contemporary art, so I sort of had both sides of the art world kind of at my disposal from a young age. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I interned for the Carnegie Museum of Art there, and also for the Andy Warhol Museum, and then started with Sotheby's as an intern in college, went on to work there for 10 years, and then left Sotheby's to go to Christie's and was there for just about another decade. So I've always been predominantly in the auction field. I ran the American art department at Christie's, which is American art up to 1945. I left there in June of 2018. And since then, I've expanded my focus to contemporary art because that seems to be where everyone's eyes and ears are at the moment. I've always sort of fantasized about the interior design world. So during COVID, with some downtime, I thought, okay, should this be a moment to pivot to interior design? And if so, what would that look like at this late stage in my career?
Looks like you'd be waiting on furniture is what it would look like.
Right, exactly. Yeah, or organizing fabric samples, which even that sounds exciting to me. But I said, that doesn't really make sense, but how can I incorporate, everything I've worked towards over the last 25 years and still dip a toe in interior design? So I came up with the concept for Above the Sofa, which is really to help interior designers kind of navigate the art world and work with their clients and, try to get sort of investment grade works of art into their projects and to provide the art market expertise to give the designers comfort in talking to their clients, or at times they'll introduce me directly to the clients. And I just started that in April.
It's exciting.
Sorry, I was a little slow. This is actually a photograph of a painting by my paternal grandfather that's hanging beside me there. So I thought I would just start by giving a brief history of the art market. This section isn't specifically digital, but I think it helps provide great context into sort of where we've come from and where we are today. So the art market as it exists today, really started with the founding of Sotheby's in 1744 and Christie's in 1766. They were the first merchants to kind of sell across category. They handled big estate sales. Rather than having an exhibition on view like many of you may have seen today, they would actually display works of art on a lawn and have people come by. But I think they were very intelligent in building a clientele and selling a broad variety of things, so something for everybody. The art dealer community really started with the Italian Renaissance, handling old masters. It was kind of a patrician profession, certainly nothing like you've seen today. Sorry, let me just... the gallery world really exploded in the 1980s. In New York, in the 1960s, you had a dealer named Leo Castelli. He represented Andy Warhol, he represented Roy Lichtenstein, two artists that used commercial imagery in their work and sort of exploited that notion of art as a commodity. And Leo Castelli was their dealer. He had a young protege named Larry Gagosian, who I'd say is responsible for creating the market the way it is today. So he's one of three sort of mega dealers active in the market. You've got Gagosian Gallery, David Zwirner, and Hauser and Wirth. Gagosian has, I believe, 19 locations. So in the art dealer community, you've really gone to sort of a lone wolf selling an old master painting to dealers that are selling billions of dollars of works of art. So just to put it in perspective, in the current market, the auctions are responsible for about $25 billion in sales a year, and galleries are responsible for about $36 billion.
Wow.
In sales a year. And then last but not least, you also have art fairs. I don't know how many of you in this room have had the chance to visit any. The big three, I would say, are Art Basel, which now has multiple locations, Frieze Art Fair, again, multiple locations, and the Armory Show in New York. Since then, many other fairs have popped up, and there are now currently 365 art fairs one can visit.
And can anyone go to those? Do you have to be trained? Are there certain gallery days that galleries can go before the public, et cetera?
So anyone can go to the art fair. You do need to reserve a ticket in advance, particularly during COVID. There are, for each of these fairs, what they call VIP preview days, which they provide access to known collectors. And we'll talk about later the best way to kind of navigate the art fairs, because if you don't have the VIP entrance and you bought the regular ticket, by the time you see the fair, unfortunately, almost everything is gone. And then if it's not gone, you think, why isn't it gone?
Yeah, why is it still here?
Yeah, but this is all just to show, the tremendous growth in the market. COVID certainly impacted the last year, but the last handful of years, we've been averaging roughly $65 billion in sales across all categories. Staggering. And the largest percentage of those sales are now in contemporary art. So it used to be old master paintings, the Impressionist and Modern. You think of sort of Picasso and Van Gogh as being the biggest sellers. That's been the most dramatic shift, and at an incredibly rapid pace. So in 2004, the contemporary art market represented 6% of the global sales, and it's now the overwhelming majority of the global sales. One primary reason for that is supply and demand. Many of those artists are still alive and well and producing. Obviously the old masters are not.
Right.
Or there are questions to be asked. So we're here today to talk about the digital world and how it's changed for the art market. The art market has been kind of a stagnant world in terms of innovation compared to many other industries. It was already trying to explore digital channels for sales, but COVID really made that a must-do. It had to innovate for survival. And the impact of those innovations has been a significant broadening of the audience of people who are looking at contemporary art, which has had, again, a tremendous impact on the market. So you have the auction houses, which started to live stream all of their auctions on Facebook with hundreds of millions of viewers. I think there's always been a great intimidation factor in terms of people knowing that you can just walk into an auction house and see anything on view, without an appointment, and certainly at no cost. And the same goes for most of the auctions. You can just show up. And so by pushing these sales out into the ether, I think in part it was sort of like watching theater when we couldn't go to the theater, but it also helped sort of demystify the process. And as a result, you've seen many newer, younger collectors who I think would have otherwise been intimidated. And we saw the same with the art fairs. So many of them were canceled during COVID. Even those that still went on introduced what they call the OVR, which is the online viewing room. So they would list everything that they would be showing at the fair, whether it was taking place or not. And for the first time, they were publishing the prices, which I can't underestimate. I think, if you have to ask for a price, you might decide to just not ask because there's an intimidation factor to that. So COVID really ushered in a new era of transparency, which was desperately overdue, and I think, again, helped bring new people into the market.
And people were at home bored and shopping online.
Well, so 66% of high net worth individuals said that their interest grew during the pandemic to collect, and I'm sure you've seen that in your world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People were desperate to do something other than watch Netflix, so they were looking at auctions and looking at things, and the anonymity of, you're not in the auction house, you don't have to raise your paddle, you can just sit there and keep clicking. It's fun.
Yes, right, exactly. The online sales are beautiful. Yeah. And speaking of online sales, so in 2019, they represented only 9% of the global art market sales. And in 2021, they represented 25%. So that's just an enormous amount of change in a short period of time. And again, I think much needed in terms of the change it brought to the art market. That's a photo of the Met, which Holly said reminds her of Thomas Crown Affair.
Yeah, it looks like the room where they came down with the helicopter.
Both of our favorite movies.
Yep.
Obviously, we all know ways to experience works of art in person, but again, the focus here today is really to see digitally, so I thought we could talk through some of those.
So the traditional methods of seeing art obviously are museums, going to galleries, auction houses, and art fairs, which you kind of covered. Each of these are interesting in their own right and different ways to do it. Auction, I think the great thing is that you used to have to subscribe, get the catalog of your interest, and now all of that is available to you. And I think it's a great way. I mean, I can waste hours upon hours upon hours. And you can also go on the big sites like Invaluable and what's the other one, where you can search one particular artist and get alerts anytime that artist comes up in any auction house, be it large or small, which is amazing. So if you're looking for a particular person or your client's looking for a particular artist, it's a great way to kind of find out where it is and when it's going to pop up or what the last sales price is, which I think you've got kind of some of the research portion of that in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the challenges, whether you're buying art for yourself or you're buying art for your clients, is that people have a very difficult time articulating what it is their taste is. And more often than not, even once they think they've articulated it, you might show them something that ticks every single box and they say, no, that's not what I like. And that's because art is so personal and people want to have that kind of immediate visceral reaction. and then an enhanced appreciation once they learn about the artist. So the extent to which you can get clients in front of works of art, whether it's being able to visit a museum or to take them through these digital channels. So museums now, for the most part, have their collections published online, which is an invaluable resource. The auction houses, as Holly said, they've now done away with their hard copy catalogs,
Completely.
which is interesting. So, they've therefore enhanced not only the catalogs that are digitally presented online, but also the content. So they'll do stories on artists. There's a tremendous amount of online learning you can do if you're so inclined on the sites. And then the art fairs, again, the publishing of the pricing is huge. We've never had that level of transparency before. If a client says, I like this, and they don't give you a budget, and then you show them what they like, and then you tell them the budget, and they say, well, that's out of the range, that's obviously counterproductive. There is a correlation most often between price and quality.
Right.
So, the more information you can arm them with at the outset, the better. So one of the things we were discussing this morning is get the gallery mailing lists. I know that's a practice you've been doing.
So yeah, anytime there's an artist that I like, I then click through to the galleries that represent them and sign up to get their mailing list. And every morning I've probably got 10 different galleries that I scroll through and see new work as it comes in an email. And I think that's a great way. Another thing about that is you will get an invitation, or they'll say, are you coming to Freeze, or are you coming to whatever? And they'll, we can give you a VIP ticket, or we can, and so if you're interested in their work, they want you there, and they want to host you in some way. So the more people that you follow in terms of galleries, it definitely helps get your foot in the door to see things earlier than others.
Exactly, and they will send you a preview of everything that they're bringing to the fair, or most everything, because, as I said, by the time the fair opens to the public, almost everything is already sold, and it's sold by way of sending these previews
Well,
in
and
advance.
I think just making relationships, if there is a particular artist that you're looking for, make a relationship with a gallery that represents them, and they will send you the things before they're ever put on their website, and before they're trying to sell it too. So the more you let them know that you're interested, the easier it's going to become to procure that for your client. Or yourself.
Right. That is the danger of
Yes,
this
one
whole
for you, one
profession.
for me.
So there are 3 websites I've mentioned at the bottom: Artsy, Ocula, for First Dibs and Artland. I don't know how many of you have used Artsy before.
I've only used Artsy and First Dibs. I don't know about Ocula or Artland.
So Ocula and Artland are very similar in profile to Artsy. They're the newer players in the game. Artsy has actually been around for at least a decade. I'll show you a slide of what that looks like. Artsy is wonderful in the sense that it has a tremendous amount of information. It does also have some pricing information, if not a specific price, at least a range. You can search by size, style, medium, location of the work. You don't necessarily want to find the perfect thing that's somewhere outside of the country. You see along the top bar, if you don't know any artists' names and you just have the basic style, you can start there. So it's a wonderful tool in that way. It's not always the most up-to-date in terms of the works that are listed as available, and with the pricing, many things will have already sold, just as a cautionary tale. So it's always good to contact the gallery.
So do galleries upload, sorry to interrupt, do galleries upload all of their works to Artsy, and so it just becomes a big store?
They upload many works.
Okay.
One of the challenges in navigating the gallery system is if you go to any sort of New York or LA gallery, for example, they have no inventory on their websites.
Right.
And they will offer a select inventory on Artsy. But they're really using Artsy to kind of capture data on anyone who might be interested in a particular artist, but it's still a tiny fraction of their offerings.
Gotcha. So they're reserving their works for their clients that they know will be purchasing them versus throwing them out to the world.
Correct. An unfortunate truth, but correct. But it can be a great resource. It's a great way to meet the galleries. You know, it's such a vast site. You'll see the good, bad, and the ugly. But, you know, everybody has different tastes, so I won't opine on that. But, you know, they do have some wonderful examples, and at every budget. Instagram is another great way to discover artists. I just listed a few galleries and, of course, a local beloved institution. Again, you know, particularly during COVID, there's been a great emphasis on educational content. So it can be a wonderful way to make new discoveries. And I know, Holly, you were saying you use Instagram to discover
So, I
artists
mean,
all
if
the
there's
time.
an artist that I like, I often will either click through and see, like, if certain galleries have liked, I mean, I kind of get down a rabbit hole, but I see, like, what galleries have liked her and what artists do they represent? And then who are her artist friends that follow her and what is their work like? And, I mean, it kind of, you can go on and on and on forever until 3 a.m. And then you have to go to sleep. But it's amazing how many you find, and then I'll have to, like, in the light of day, come back and be like, okay, what all did I save?
Right.
Who do I want to reach out to? Would this be a good fit? Then, like, look up prices and actually get on the gallery websites. But I do use that little flag or save tab on Instagram constantly and kind of have a running art list of things that are interesting to me and potentially clients or artist spotlight series for my blog.
Right. So this is how research used to be done for art pricing. In fact, my first internship at Sotheby's, I used to cut out of the catalogs the works of art that had come up for auction, rubber glue them onto a sheet, write down the price, and that's how we kept track of pricing of past works and how we used those comparables to price new works, obviously. I'm dating myself. So all of the auction houses now are providing access to far greater information, which again is a theme of this digital transformation, you know, additional transparency. So you can look up past sales by a particular artist on any of the auction websites. They will only list those sales that they've conducted, but it can still give you a great way of seeing, you know, for what prices an artist has sold previously.
Well, and it's a good way to educate your client as well, because if they're like, I think I want a Warhol, and they have no clue what a Warhol, you know, that's probably a bad example because they're gonna have a clue what that cost, but there might be artists that they have no clue. Well, you need to have them. You can send them links to here's what recent ones have sold, does this fit in your budget, you know, and gently show them things like that. And should help them narrow down, well, if this is the style you like, maybe there's an artist that's a better fit, and then you can search kind of in that category in which it's sold that might be a better price point.
But Warhol is such a great example
because you can find inexpensive. Yeah.
Right, you can buy a Warhol for $2,000 or over $100 million.
Right.
It just depends on,
Right.
on a variety of
whole
factors.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. There are 2 other paid subscription services that you can use. You can pay for them as a one-off. You know, if you really need to do a deep dive research into a particular artist and you want to capture all of the known sales, Artnet and AskArt.com. So they capture, you know, even the most random of auction houses, you know, internationally. I use it all the time, particularly if I'm being offered something. I just want to make sure that there's no auction history. You know, I want to make sure something hasn't gone unsold at some point. So I just always want to make sure that I have the full scope of the history of that work. Because, you know, even though a gallery or a client might provide you that data, there certainly can be omissions. And you can also set alerts on AskArt and Artnet to see if something's coming up.
So if there's an artist you're looking for. Do you recommend, I mean, do you think those are necessary when there's And I guess in your field, because you were actually an art consultant, but for me, I don't know that I'd necessarily need that because I feel like I can research it on my own just between Sotheby's or Christie's or Invaluable or those places that I generally can get the gist. But I guess if it's something that the high level piece, you need the provenance all the way back.
Well, that and what happens is if something has come up for auction and gone unsold, it's usually omitted from the provenance. And that's such an important piece of information to know because it does impact the value.
Right.
I mean, if it's ancient history, the impact will be more minimal.
Right.
But it's still interesting to note.
Why was it unsold?
Why was it unsold? Mm-hmm.
Right.
But you can call me and I can look it up for you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so this is a chapter on how to buy, both digitally and in real life. And I'll turn this over to Holly.
These are just a few of the things, which obviously Sotheby's, Christie's, the big auction houses are, if you're buying some like really high-level important pieces. I tend to search a lot, not only for art, but for antiques. You can get amazing prices at your small local auction houses. And these are just some of the ones that I use a lot. And some, like Leland Little is based out of Hillsborough, North Carolina, and a client had bought a piece of furniture there years ago, a beautiful sideboard. And I find more amazing finds there. Charlton Hall, I bought a gorgeous 18th century lacquer chinoiserie secretary for myself that I would have paid $100,000 for in New York, but I bought it for nothing at Charlton Hall, and it's perfect and immaculate. So don't forget searching auction houses. And I mean, I bought a North Carolina artist who's still alive, so it's the value is not crazy, but it makes me so happy. Giant piece of folk art that now the prices have kind of quadrupled since I started sharing his work. It's just fun to see, and you can just get great deals if you're looking for something at a lower price point. Search your local auction houses. Search the smaller auction houses. And there's a random one I had found in Texas that I didn't even list on there. Oops. That I found going through, I think Invaluable, or one of those other auction sites. I was looking for a particular Native American artist, and they had it in Texas, and then I started following their site and ended up buying a piece of jewelry from some, oil baron's wife's estate. It's just fun. It's like it's another way for me to shop is basically the problem. It's just another shopping resource. But they're all everything's online and you can see things like, it's amazing. Then the next one would be the galleries. These are just kind of a list of some of the galleries that I frequent. And a lot of times I will send clients a list of galleries early on in the process and just say, look through, does anything speak to you? Or I will take them locally to Haddell Brooks or somewhere in Charlotte and say, okay, let's look at realist work, let's look at really impressionistic work, let's look at completely abstract, let's look at all these different things and what appeals to you. And like sometimes they're like, this is all way too funky, and we backtrack and we go a different way. But this is really helpful, I think, to have that list for clients to see. The artist collectives, which are here right now, I use those all the time, which are in Atlanta, Charleston, DC, Nashville. And so they have a group of kind of local artists. And these are all different price points as well. So if you've got young clients and you're trying to fill some holes but want to use original art, which is something I feel strongly about, I really prefer original art if you can versus printed things that are not going to gain any value over lifetime. And I realize that there's certainly a chance that original art is not going to gain value, but if you love it, only buy things you love, and so then it doesn't matter, is kind of my thought, but I think it's important to buy original pieces. But I love a lot of these galleries because you can kind of get lots of different price points between young artists who are just starting out and more established artists.
Many of these were new to me, and they all looked great, so this was exciting.
It's fun to... And, a lot of times only about half the artists that somebody carries or less appeal to me, but it's then I'd love to then go down the rabbit hole of, okay, so if that artist is represented at Blueprint Gallery in Dallas, who else represents them? And then I go to wherever that gallery in San Francisco and see what other artists they have, and then, it's kind of like, if that person likes what I like, maybe they have other,
Right.
other good artists.
Well, and when I go to a big art fair, I probably like no more than 5% of everything.
Right. But it's such a treat when you find that artist that you've never seen, and it's like a aha
Discovery.
Christmas morning thing.
There are the logos of all the galleries. So you'll note I've included some of the bigger names. Yes, they do sell sort of record-breaking prices. Christie's still holds the lead for the most expensive work ever sold at auction by Leonardo da Vinci, called Salvator Mundi, that sold for $450 million.
And tell the other part about it that you told me.
So there's a fabulous documentary available right now called The Last Leonardo. This is a picture with a very storied history. There is still some question as to its authenticity. The Provenance has a few gaps in it. It was meant to be included in a major exhibition at the Louvre. And the day before the show opened, the picture did not arrive. It was last spotted on a yacht in the Mediterranean, but it basically hasn't been seen since the sale in 2018. And yeah, there's also a wonderful book about it, and I think the jury is still out. Obviously, Christie's very firmly believed in the authenticity. I do not purport to be a Leonardo expert, but I will say, standing in front of it, I was certainly a believer, that maybe due in large part to the incredible marketing machine of Christie's. But yeah, it's interesting that it is both the most expensive work at auction to have ever sold, and also, hands down, the most controversial. So watch this space, watch the documentary, the book if you're so inclined.
Does it say who bought it?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But I did include these sites because, in order to sort of accommodate the best clients of all of these auction houses, many of whom have not only one home filled with magnificent items, but maybe 5 or 10 homes filled with magnificent items. All of the houses have had to figure out a way to be able to be full service to these clients. So there are many sales that take place, sometimes online, sometimes live, that are sort of collector's sales. So you'll have a mix of, sort of lower value fine art and decorative arts, but there are many great finds to be had there. And again, all of the exhibitions are open to the public. You can just walk right in, and, there's just something to discover.
Well, in terms of furniture, I know we're talking art, but in terms of furniture, there are so many beautiful, if you want antiques right now, there are so many beautiful pieces. If you need dining room chairs, look at Christie's and Sotheby's, and they have what's now, it's not the arcade sales, but they have some of their lower.
The collector's sale.
They have these, like, you can get gorgeous, way less expensive than some of the things in here that are new if you want antiques.
And no delayed lead time.
And they're not delayed. Your upholsterer won't be able to recover them for a year, but.
Right. But that's always what I like to say about art. It's already painted and ready to go.
Well, Cherish, the website Cherish, that has been their big push on, like, everything's in stock, which is amazing. Like, I'm like, that's a great push right now because you can't get anything.
Right, even the big box retailers are months and months, so, yeah. Although art shipping has been a little bit problematic.
Shipping in general is a problem.
And Artnet, the site I mentioned for research, they also have online auctions. They're probably best in terms of editioned works by well-known artists, but they do them regularly. They have a team of experts that vet the pieces, so they're another good source. Okay, so some of these we've discussed are Basel, Frieze Art Fair, Armory Art Fair. All of those, again, the extent to which you can be in touch with the galleries who will be exhibiting in advance of the show opening, the better. You'll just have access to everything that they're showing. Platform is an interesting one. It's a brand new site. It's only been around for at most 6 months. It was founded by David Zwerner, who I mentioned earlier as one of the mega gallerists. And they launch once a month a handful of artists from a handful of galleries, and it's a buy now function. But they're launching artists who have, maybe a 200-person wait list at their gallery. And this is about as democratic as the art world gets. It's like whoever can click the button.
Push the button first. So, do they announce that our sale is every Friday or whatever it is? And
yeah, they send you an email so you know exactly what time. It's a lifesaver, but it's just a nice way to kind of navigate in a new city. And then we've been talking a lot about mocking works up for clients to see.
And I normally, most galleries can do that in 2 seconds. So they'll say, just shoot me a picture of your client's living room, or if we're putting it above the sofa or the entry hall or whatever it is, and then they will mock up quickly, they will put the actual piece over the sofa. But you can do it yourself with Art Placer, which is an app that I think makes it really easy. But generally, most galleries will do that for you happily. Because most clients are not visual. That's why they hired you. So
yes.
They need to see it in situ when they can.
Exactly. And some galleries will ship things on approval, above a certain price point. It gets tricky.
Yeah, that gets tricky. Who's paying for the shipping? Just
all the things.
Yes, all the things.
So this is just a quick slide to show the software that I use. So it's something called Arternal. It's mostly used by galleries and auction houses. I personally don't have any inventory, but I use it to track anything I see that's interesting, whether it's at a gallery, at an art fair, at an auction. I enter it into this inventory so that if a designer approaches me and says, I have this project, the clients are looking to spend this amount, these are the spaces, these are the colors they might like, or this is the type of work, I can generate a gallery to share with them literally in minutes as a sort of first visual test to see what it is that they gravitate towards. And then, of course, we narrow it down from there. So not everything that's in my inventory will necessarily still be available because the art world is such a dynamic and fast-moving place, particularly for certain artists. But it's a great way, to help people who have trouble articulating what it is they like, to kind of get them more comfortable with the space. This is also something just available to art world professionals, but I thought was interesting to note because it's something
really
we've been discussing. It's a site called ArtCube. And one of their services is to analyze Instagram traffic. They are studying every major curator at museums around the world. They're studying art advisors around the world. They're studying artists. And they're looking at, which artists are getting the most traction from which sources. And they also list on the side, this artist has a forthcoming museum exhibition. This artist has a solo show at a gallery. And so far, they seem to be identifying artists before they're about to take off, which just tells you how powerful Instagram has become, certainly in your world and also
I wonder
in
how they're going to monetize that. I mean, it has to.
Well, I have to pay for it, so they've got.
Right, but I wonder. I mean, it's if they're identifying them before they're going to start, purchasing and selling.
Right.
But it's an interesting concept, and I think it's fascinating that Instagram is driving the art market in the direction based on people's likes.
Right. Well, if you look at all of the major auctions that just transpired in London last week, most of the works that sold for many multiples of their estimates were created in 2018 to the present. So we're seeing this dramatic shift in terms of an interest of, brand new contemporary art that hasn't stood the test of time.
And it being at that level to sell at that price point is fascinating.
Yeah. So I don't know how we are in time.
Yeah, how are we on time? 50, okay.
Okay.
So we've got some questions for each other. Some of these we've kind of covered, but I will go ahead and dive in. Do you ever suggest budgets, or how do you, when a designer comes to you, sometimes my clients will just be like, show me what you think I need, which is like, from $1 to 1 million,
Right.
where do we fall in there? And then other times people will be like, okay, I think we want to buy these 3 pieces first, and this is what we have in the budget. How do you work with that with clients? And how would, if I'm as a designer and I wanted to hire you, how does that work?
So for above the sofa, I charge on a flat fee basis to the designer with the idea that the designer is then recouping that cost
Right.
from the client. I do that because it means I can just as easily source the $5,000 item as the $100,000 item, and I'm not making recommendations
Based on
value
price of
because
something.
I'm not
Yep.
incented to do so. And the idea is that you, as the designer, can actually add money to your bottom line by taking the commission.
Right.
So I negotiate the discounts directly with the gallery, and I pass those discounts on to you. Now, the one thing I've been discovering in this business is every interior designer seems to have a different business model.
True.
That's also sort of true in the art advisory world. So, I've pivoted, just depending on what the situation is. But it's a rough calculation based on number of walls, square footage of the house, are there any existing artworks that need to be conserved or reframed? I just
Right.
present a custom
Right.
proposal based on the scope of the project. But certainly you have to start with a budget, because otherwise it just leads to disappointment.
It
If
does,
people are
yes.
not upfront,
Right.
they wind up liking the things that are outside of their budget.
Right.
Of
And-
course.
And nothing's ever going to look as good as that.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. Do you prefer recommending established artists over up-and-comers with people, or is it a mix?
It's really a mix. It depends on their comfort level. I mean, I think, having the confidence to buy an emerging artist is really exciting because, again, it's sort of like venture investing.
Right.
Maybe 1 out of 10 can take off with sort of meteoric success.
Yeah.
But you do need to be comfortable with the fact that maybe,
This may not
for whatever
gain value.
reason, it might not gain value. So it really depends on the profile of the client and their comfort level. And maybe some mix is the answer. Buy a few established pieces that are maybe a little bit more, but you can feel comfortable that you could turn around and sell them
Right.
tomorrow, and buy some emerging artists. So that's very much a dialogue with either the designer or the designer and the client.
Right. Do you always do the simulated placement for them before you ship something or try it?
I haven't always, but more and more I'm doing it. I mean, I'm a very visual
Right.
person, and, again, as you said, our clients hire us because they're not.
Right.
So the extent to which you can take out every bit of guesswork.
And it's just guarantees it's staying in the house once they get it, and doesn't guarantee it, but it helps.
It helps, yeah.
It helps make you think it's going to actually be a fit before you ship something from somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, books or movies, you mentioned that one. Are there any great books? Like, I remember the Thomas Hoving Making the Mummies Dance when I was thinking I wanted to be in the art world.
Right.
Out of college, that was my favorite. Are there any good art movies and books that you would recommend to people who have an interest?
So there is a book from 2018 or 2019 called Boom by Michael Schneerson. It really sort of tracks the history of the art market, and I think explains a lot of the complexities of navigating today's art market. It may be a little inside baseball, but I think people would find that helpful.
Yeah, any other good documentaries that are like the fakes
Yes,
or the...
yes. Made You Look,
Okay.
which I forget the platform at the moment. It's about the scandal involving Knoedler Gallery, which was one of the oldest galleries in New York, and they sold many, many works by many of the abstract expressionists to a number of collectors over years, all from the same source, all of which have turned out to be not right, including a Rothko for $8 million. Knoedler is no longer around. But
I think I've watched, yeah.
it's a really well-done documentary. So between that and The Last Leonardo, I think those are great choices.
I think it's so interesting watching this.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would love to hear at what stage you begin the dialogue with clients about art for your projects.
Usually at the beginning. So if it's a new client in an existing house, I do a walkthrough with them and see everything they have and talk about what you're going to get rid of, what do you want to keep, what's important to you, and try and gauge what they currently have hanging for art. Do they think it's worthy of staying, et cetera. Then once we establish what they're keeping, does it even need to be reframed, and what is their budget or sentimental value of, does it have to stay over the sofa? Does it have to, can it be in a less prominent place? Can we move all these children's portraits to your bedroom? Can we move your wedding photos, different places?
Right.
So that's kind of, I try and establish that early and to make them consider, and because I feel like accessories and art are the two things at the end of the project. They've spent all their money on their curtains and their wallpaper and their everything, and it doesn't look finished because you haven't accounted for art and accessories.
Right. Well, that led into my next question, which is, have you ever had clients with an existing collection that presents design challenges? Like, have you ever had to say, I'm sorry, but I can't incorporate that into the living room? Or
I have, and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes it makes them very mad, and I've hurt their feelings.
Yeah.
But it can ruin what someone thinks is beautiful. I'm like, I can promise you 10 people would walk in here and think that shouldn't be here either.
Right.
And I try and gently say that because you want
and
them,
it's your reputation.
It's my
as
reputation,
well.
but it's their house, and you always have to remember it's their house. It represents them. So, but it's it is a sticky situation.
Yes.
I mean, usually I'm like, let's start with reframing it if we have to keep it. If it's a horrible frame or something, can that help? And then can we move the placement to a more intimate location where they can enjoy
I
it?
like that, yes.
Like the closet.
Right.
Yes.
So I think we're both in our respective businesses because we're excellent shoppers. Do you ever buy for yourself for inventory?
Yes, it's generally one for me, one for, actually don't buy that much inventory, but I would never buy anything that, even if it can't go in my house at this minute, I don't buy anything that I wouldn't be okay with having me end up with or my children end up with. And that, I started in this business, the English Room, which is the name of my business, is my mother started an antiques importing business in the early 80s and would go to England and come home with containers full of stuff and France, and I started going on these buying trips really young. And her thing was always like, if nobody buys this, am I okay with one of my children ending up with it? Is it pretty enough? And that was kind of always her barometer of, do you buy it or don't you buy it? And that's kind of how I feel. If there's something I can't live without, I will buy it in hopes that I will place it somewhere for a client.
Right.
And sometimes it ends up in my house.
That's good discipline. I like that.
There's no discipline. None.
And do your clients typically task you with buying the art? And if so, on what basis do you charge?
So I don't charge hourly. I do an upfront contract fee based on the whole job at the front end, and then I do cost plus on all the furnishings. I actually don't charge to procure art, but the galleries generally will give you a commission of 10%, or depends on the gallery, 10% commission or a commission, which I generally don't even take, and I take trade and I buy things for myself.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, I mean, half of the art in my house has been purchased on trade or something, just because and some of the galleries are funny in Charlotte. They're like, do you want to buy something? You have a big credit. I'm like, I'm waiting for something really good. I'm like, just hold on. Just hold on. And clients know that, I'm going to get a commission, but generally we buy it together. I don't go out and bring 6 things home. And I generally take them to the gallery or show them mock-ups or give them pictures. And sometimes it starts way, way early, and I'm trying to educate them on different artists, and they eventually kind of land together. But sometimes clients want to go out on, this weekend, I had a client text me on Saturday saying, where can I go today? My husband has 3 hours. We want to go look at art. And I'm like, well, some of the good places are closed on Saturday, but just she needed to be educated. And so I can just give her some galleries and send her on her way. So it kind of depends on the client.
Got it.
And how involved they want me to be.
All right, I think we covered my last question, which was about your weekly feature.
So yeah, the weekly feature is I reach out to artists for my Artist Spotlight series, and I used to do it every week. I've gotten a little bad, and it's hard. People are busy. It's hard to get artists to respond as well in terms of filling out the questionnaire. But I love finding artists, and I love finding them early, and then they end up in galleries. And I mean, I love that part of it. I love seeing their success. Makes me happy. Any questions?
We might have room for one or two questions, if anybody has one. I do want to use the microphone just because we are recording today, so I want to make sure that we hear the question. You have a question?
On the ArtCube thing that you subscribe to, do they share their analytics with you at all?
You mean exactly how they create those lists?
No, the artists that they did identify.
Oh, yes.
And that, yeah, in
Yeah,
that
so-
slide, it looks like they give you, I mean, you can't really see it, but on here, it looks like they give you all the gauges of the parameters they think, of the things they
Yeah.
are looking for and how that person rates. I haven't been on there, but.
And they've separated it into categories. So I've selected emerging artists on the rise. So they've divided it between insider heavy versus market heavy. So they're also paying attention to what's selling at art fairs and auctions. So they do emerging artists and also mid-career artists. And again, they're tracking, what forthcoming exhibitions are on the horizon for the artist, what museums have acquired the artist's work. Because for established artists, it's much easier to kind of figure out a track record and a trajectory because you have auction results to which to point. For emerging artists, you have to look at these other criteria that are less easy to measure, such as, what private collectors have already bought this work? Have any museums expressed interest? What exhibitions are forthcoming? But these are all, first of all, that information can be hard to find unless you're in the business. That it's not as exact a metric as you would have for a mid-career or an established artist.
Anybody else? No? Okay, great, wonderful. Thank you so much, Liz and Holly. That was a really informative and very interesting chat.
Thank you.